Okay, folks, be on your best behavior. You're being recorded.
So Ron, real quick, this is what birthday cards look like when you start getting a little older. They start asking, don't worry about age, and the new 30 and the 40. And
I know, when they tell you not to worry about age is when you've got to start worrying.
But the punchline, what does it say? Denial is the new math.
I'm very good at that.
Anyway.
Thank you. Yeah.
My favorite position.
Denial.
Okay, so we've got Claudia, I can't see you. Cody, I can't see you. Fika, you've arrived. Hi there, Fika. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Fine, good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you as well.
Cody,
Ron, didn't you invite anybody who's doing time?
No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't come to this. It's too racy.
But it's just for them.
I know, but it might cause a riot.
Mm.
Oh, hi there. Hi there, John. Welcome.
Hi.
The only one I can't see is Cody.
Yeah, I if you're going to record the event, I choose to not have my image on the recording.
You don't want your image?
No.
Okay. Fair. I won't ask you why. I'm not asking you why, okay? I'm not asking you why. Okay, I'm really not. But okay. Hi there, Mark.
Hello.
Good to see you. I was wondering if you're going to come because there's very little Hegel this time. Although I'm sure you can get him in somewhere.
I'll try.
I rely on you. All right. My screen is filled up, so we're now going to begin. So first of all, welcome to the regulars, the ones who been with me for about 2.5 years. We've sort of become friends. Where's James? Coming to think of it. And welcome to all the people who are joining us. I hope that I hope you're going to get something out of it. It's a very it's another one of these easy light evenings that you're used to, because it's about time travel. So what happens here is, for those who don't know, I spend a relatively short time introducing the topic, and then I open it to you, and then we discuss things. I hope that I can get through it in the time that I want to. I doubt it, but I will try. Anyway, what we do here is basically we ask questions, sometimes about things we normally don't think about, or sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But all questions lead to thoughts that lead to other questions. There aren't unimportant questions, since they all lead to what we consider our place in the world. At the very least, we can try to stave off the culture that reflects the dearth of creative thought. Sorry about that. Anyway, why time travel? I mean, who cares about time travel, right? Obviously, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do because here is an example of a reality explained to us by experts. What I try to do generally is to buck the trend of specialization, where science and philosophy have each split into ever finer disciplines that then split even further. What I'm looking for is to move us in arcs that widen our knowledge rather than decreasing it. I've got nothing against scientists. Of course, some of my best friends are scientists, but some of them might not really be like possibly what I say tonight, although they should actually. So scientists are usually or often sure they are right, that they have the answers. But it is philosophers who question whether science, especially physics, is as exact as scientists think it is. So let me give you a very, very brief example. Physicist Sean Carroll in a recent podcast says that good philosophers have always listened to physics. Note the way he puts it. We listen to them. Kant wouldn't have been, I quote, Kant wouldn't have been Kant without Newton just before. Half of what Kant does is making sense of Newton. Vice versa. Einstein wouldn't have been Einstein without Kant. Einstein read Kant, and Kant's ruminations about space and time were the main ingredients for him to write equations that predicted black holes, apparently. Actually, what it shows is that scientists such as Einstein were influenced by philosophers. It's interesting that from a young age, Einstein had an interest in philosophy. Einstein said about himself, I quote, as a young man, I preferred books whose content concerned the whole worldview, and in particular, philosophical ones, Schopenhauer, Hume, Mach, to some extent, Kant, Plato, Aristotle. That's what he said. But he also avidly read Spinoza, who brought him into sharp relief his view about nature and God. Yes, philosophical ideas are interpretations of reality, but so are scientific theories. After all, how is it possible for physicists to have such different interpretations? How they argue, just as much as philosophers do. So science is not just about writing equations and making predictions. It's about reconceptualization of the world. If you think about Copernicus, he understood that the Earth is spinning around the sun. But can you prove that the Earth is not the center of the universe? No, you couldn't make an experiment. The point is that if you change your conceptual structure, everything starts making much more sense. That is what philosophers do better than scientists. I dare to say tonight, because it's my place, so I say it. Anyway, what I will do today is to take time travel as an example. That's why I'm doing time travel today. It's an example of everything that I want to get through. All right. I hope to use it as a broad sweep of my philosophy, which is epistemological, and bring in some of the things I've mentioned in the past. For example, the now, memory, time, the objective past, the truth, the future, relativity, free will, all that is mixed up in what I'm going to talk about tonight. So time travel, hold on to your hats, okay? Some of it is a bit dense. Well, most of it is actually. So the key to time travel is Einstein's theory of special relativity. And his general theory of relativity shows how space itself is warped, and so time can be warped with it. Don't worry, folks, I stop with the science now for quite a while. And here is the spoiler. Time travel is impossible, even theoretically. That's the spoiler. Now, instead of doing what is normally done, go through it, do the introduction, and come to a great big climax at the end, you've got the climax here. And I'm going to show you that time travel is impossible, even theoretically. So before we look at the science, I am positing that the whole notion of time travel is nonsense. So the maths works, but scientists have not stopped to think what time travel actually means. Arriving at something that has already happened, which is travel to the past, arriving at something that will happen. That's time travel. Not mucking around with maths, but time travel is actually doing that. So, well, we know that traveling to the past has huge perceptual problems, like the grandfather paradox. We all know that you go back in time, you kill your grandfather, therefore your parents won't be born, and you will not be able to go back and do what you did. But traveling to the future has problems just as great. Physicists and science fiction don't somehow recognize that traveling to the future would mean traveling to events that will happen. So if I travel forward, say 20 years, it means that in 20 years, the events will, in any case, happen, right? i.e., the future is there, available to be reached, This is a deterministic view of the universe and puts paid to the notion of free will. But what about 100 years from now? How will I get to a time that will happen where I will not have lived that long? How can that be time travel? I can't land anywhere else but at my future. Basically, I will have speeded up time. And of course, when I get to the future, it will actually be my past. In any case, I will never travel to my future since it will be the past when I get there. It will have happened, and it won't be anyone else's future either. Why? While the laws of nature can often be completely at odds with our everyday experience, they need to not only be self-consistent, but plausible within the intention of the context. Now, about the physicists and science fiction don't somehow understand that traveling to the past would mean traveling to something that has already happened, that happened to you. So if you wanted to be at a monumental event, say the crucifixion, you would have to go back to where you had already been. But that would have been before you were born. How does that work? I say this within my notion of time as being personal. The past, I maintain, is memory, my memory. History is other people's memory, which I accept, and why history is so unreliable. How do I go back to a time before I was born? You understand the problems here. It didn't happen to me. So to which past do I go? To someone else's past? And how will I go to the past, since that very act, the actual act of going to the past, will be the future? Because I'm actually going somewhere to the future, which is the past. And what about dinosaurs? You know, we see all these films about going back and seeing dinosaurs, but that's a false memory. Nobody was around to see dinosaurs. I wasn't, and nobody was there. This is a false memory. This I call a speculative false memory. Any time travel to the past can only be to our individual past, not to any past that wasn't ours. Why? Because there is no objective the past. I've mentioned this before. The past is memory, my memory, but it's even worse actually. Since the past is memory, and memory is unreliable or false, we would go back to something that may not have happened. In other words, we cannot time travel. We go back to imagination, perhaps, an imagined past. We love to think about time travel. Imagining going to the future is wonderful. Physicists tell us it's possible based on Einstein's special law of relativity, but they've got it wrong. We are told the more you accelerate, the slower your proper time will pass. That's time dilation. For example, J. Richard Gott, professor of physics at Princeton, tells us that moving clocks move more slowly. No, they do not. Your time will not change. Your time will pass more slowly for an observer, not for you. Your time ticks along as it did, no matter what happens to others. Physicist Brian Greene states categorically that time travel is absolutely possible, and that relativity lays out a blueprint for time travel to the future. No, it doesn't. We can't slow down or speed up the rate of our personal time. Clocks and watches do not go slower or faster for us, no matter where we are or how fast we travel. Moving clocks move slower, he says. No, they don't. They do so only for an observer, not for the space traveler. So, if you could ever speed away to the stars at close to the speed of light and come back after 5 years, although everyone on Earth would be 50 years older, you would still have aged only 5 years. And yes, it might be nice to note that you had added on only 5 years while everyone else was 50 years older. But the fact is that you had not really changed anything in your personal time span. You would still be only 5 years older than you were when you left. Unfortunately, despite the fact that everyone you know on Earth will be 50 years older than when you had left 5 years previously, it would not mean that you would live longer than you would have had you stayed on Earth. In fact, you wouldn't even think of it as having traveled in time if there weren't anything to compare it to. If you weren't later in contact with those who had aged at a different rate, time, after all, is relative. Everyone's time is personal. There is no time in a universal sense. So our getting 5 years older in outer space, while everyone else's age increases by 50 years here on Earth, has to do with our own personal time. It's not time travel. By the way, I set this out in my book, Time to Tell, which I advise you to read because I set it out quite nicely in connection with aspects of time such as now, simultaneity, and more. So let's imagine two friends, Mary and Carol, both 25 years old. Mary was the lucky astronaut who traveled into space for 5 years at close to the speed of light. So when Mary returned to Earth, she was 30 years old and found Carol to be an old woman of 75. That would be quite a shocking reunion, but possibly mitigated by the fact that Carol thought she could ask Mary, who theoretically had time traveled, what was going to happen in the future, perhaps to know the winning lottery numbers that were still to come. Mary would look at her in amazement, for lottery numbers that had come up were obviously not in Carol's future. But in a strange twist, it seemed to Mary that it was Carol who had traveled in time. After all, Carol had lived through 50 years, while Mary had been through a mere 5 years. And they would be both amazed to hear Brian Greene stating that if you wanted to leapfrog into the future to see what the world would be like 1,000,000 years from now, it could theoretically be done. I mean, really. Mary would, in fact, have no idea what Carol's future will be, since she had not traveled to the future, and certainly not to Carol's future. The notion that there is such a journey into the future is patently ridiculous. Mary didn't travel forward in Carol's time or in anyone's time. She didn't travel in her time any differently to what we all do as time passes. Neither of their clocks moved faster or slowly, more slowly for them. Beneath the concept of time travel is the implication that the future is where we have not yet arrived. So bang goes free will. This is in fact what Einstein's theory of special relativity suggests. By destroying any notion of universal time and having time relative according to location in space, the future is supposedly out there waiting for us, and which we simply can't see until we get there. As Bart said in The Simpsons, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? If the fact that we are moving linearly towards the future implies that we will eventually arrive somewhere, it has no connection to time travel as is popularly envisaged. And underlying it all is the covert presumption that there is a future real or correct time that can be used as a marker to show that time moves faster or slower. But there is no universal time. Time depends where one is. Time is always in relation to someone else's time, so that Mary's time is always relative to what Carol's time is. If, when Mary was traveling away from the Earth was destroyed, she could not be considered as traveling in time, since there would be no way of comparing. In any case, there could never be a way of comparing two times. It would not be possible to communicate with someone in another time zone, because the length of time it took for the communication to travel between two time zones would be equal to the gap in time between them. Are you all with me? You don't need to answer that. We're all together traveling in time. And neither could an observer see both Carol and Mary while Mary traveled in space. If we take this extreme version of time travel, the observer would have to see both clocks and see two different rates of time while they were happening. It's not the classic case of one Voyager being 5 years older and one on Earth being 50 years older. That is observed after the event. It would be akin to seeing Schrödinger's cat being both alive and dead, rather than positing that that is what is happening within the closed box. I've never seen anybody say they've seen a live and dead cat, only when the box is opened. There is no correct time, apart from where the observer, the individual, is. For me, this presents another problem, which has to do with the now. Einstein showed that there was no one now. Everyone had a different now depending on location and speed. I, as you know, have a more radical stance. There is no now at all. How then is Einstein? We're going to get on to a bit of science now, folks. Now I've told you what I'm going to say doesn't work. I'm now going to say it. Okay. Okay. How then is Einstein associated with the notion of what physicists called a block universe? The argument is that once we agree that everything exists now elsewhere, we have to insist that everything in the universe exists now. In this block uniform, the future, present, and past exist in the same way. It's just that we don't experience them in the same way. So if all times exist similarly, then our past selves are alive the same way our present selves are. This is an objective view of the universe, and so does not make sense to me in the light of Einstein's view of different nouns. It seems to be a throwback to Newton in his objective view of time. I can't see how the block universe follows from Einstein's special theory of relativity. And it doesn't make sense to me for anything to be thought of as objective. Objective knowledge is hugely problematic. If there isn't one now, but that each now is according to speed and location, to put it crudely, there is no objective now. Did Einstein consider his special theory of relativity to be an objective view of reality? I put this question to Terry, the Terry on the top. After all, I'm not a physicist. And I'm indebted to him for pointing me to David Hume. A scientist pointed me to David Hume, an 18th century Scottish philosopher, and the influence of Hume on Einstein. There is, Terry said, a difference in Einstein's approach when he was younger than when he was older. That was very, very interesting. And by the way, this is a great example of philosophers and scientists working together within mutual influence and inspiration. I think it's fantastic. So I looked at that aspect, and yes, Terry is right, of course. In 1915, Einstein wrote a letter to the philosopher and physicist Moritz Schlick, who had recently composed an article on the theory of relativity. Einstein praised it and went on to express his intellectual debt to Hume's treatise of human nature, which Einstein said he had studied avidly and with admiration shortly before discovering the theory of relativity. It is very possible, Einstein said, that without these philosophical studies, I would not have arrived at the solution. More than 30 years later, his opinion hadn't changed, as he recounted in a letter to his friend Michel Bessot. He wrote, "Insofar as I'm aware, the immediate influence of David Hume on me was great." In Einstein's autobiographical writing from 1949, he expands on how Hume helped him formulate the theory of special relativity. It was necessary to reject the erroneous axiom of the absolute character of time, i.e. simultaneity. Just mention my book again. I make a strong case against simultaneity in my book, Time to Tell. In fact, that's how my book begins, as the run-up showing the impossibility of now. So what happened? How did it seem that Einstein approved of the block universe? Again, this is what Terry informed me. Einstein was heavily influenced by Hume's subjectivity, as we've seen. So much so that he understood time to be completely personal, i.e. subjective. It was, he worked out, that the only time in the universe is that for each individual. It seems, though, that the influence of his teacher, Minkowski, thank you, Terry, with formalist maths and later Hilbert, drove the early Einstein to become a believer of the most objective of all physical interpretations, the block universe. Einstein seemed to move from his earlier Hume-type subjectivism to an objective view of time, so reconciling the paradox of different times for people according to speed and location. The Hume-Einstein connection is multifaceted and raises fascinating connections between science and philosophy. When examining the nature of time, we enter a technicolored area in which physics and philosophy overlap. How are we doing? Oh, I need to carry on for a few more minutes. I'm overstepping my whatever I set for myself. But I want to talk about the observer. It's very. Hi, Anton. Good to see you. Who else haven't I seen? James, I asked about you before.
I'm sorry, I didn't have my
Good to see you.
sound on.
Good to see you. Okay, how are we doing? Okay, Sakit, I can't see. Fika, I can't see. Fika, are you with us? Cody.
I'm here.
That's a low voice for Fika.
I'm here, Ron.
Oh,
Sorry about that. I had to change the spots. There was too much sun there, so.
sun is good. Nothing wrong with sun. I'm all for it. Okay,
Nothing wrong.
the observer, very, very important part. I mentioned it. That's the one thing that for some unknown reasons, physicists just leave him out. I mean. Physicists in general have fudged the observer, and so also fudged the issue of knowledge, of what is known. The observer is a metaphor for perspective, and perspective consists of different frameworks for knowledge. It has been stated, in fact, that time goes faster at a higher elevation than at a lower elevation. I'm gonna argue with that as well. Of course, that's why I'm here. Physicist Carlo Rovelli tells us in his books and talks for general audiences that it is a fact that a watch positioned higher will go faster than a watch lower down. Well, that is measurable, he says, and goes on to say that it can be measured by a super sensitive atomic clock, even when the difference in height is only 30 centimeters. This fact, he says, has nothing to do with Einstein's theory. But it is not fact that time goes faster higher up without an observer. And it has everything to do with Einstein's theories. While time does go faster on Earth at a high elevation relative to an observer, it does so due to gravitational time dilation, a consequence of Einstein's theory of general relativity, which posits that gravity of a massive body such as the Earth warps the space-time around it, causing the flow of time to speed up or slow down depending on its distance from the mass. For Jack, at the top of a mountain, 5 minutes will be 5 minutes on his watch, as it would be for Bill in a valley. Jack's clock will have moved faster relative to Bill's, and this will be seen by comparing atomic clocks brought together from each, albeit too small to be ordinarily noticeable. For differences in time to be noticeable, the process will be speeded up. Of Bill flying into space at the speed of light, and we are back to time travel saga with its attendant fallacies. It all comes down to the fact that no two events happen at the same time, and clocks tick at different rates according to where they are in relation to an observer. We don't then need to go into the realm of time travel or the notion of that higher clocks tick faster than lower clocks to understand the principle that all clocks run at different rates depending on where the observer is located. In other words, I'm coming to an end, folks. The end of my time travel. In other words, clocks are accurate only to themselves. When clocks are coordinated to give an accurate time, as they are for GPS, the clocks on a number of satellites in orbit above Earth are averaged to an incredibly accuracy in order to provide location information anywhere on or near the Earth's surface at a point on the Earth, i.e. the observer. We can think of the observer as an independent arbitrator, and the fact that each observer is an independent arbitrator provides another perspective of what is meant by time is relative. It is different for each observer, who is necessarily in a different location from every other observer. It is clear why people do not time travel when they speed away close to the speed of light. And it is clear why people who are at a higher location do not grow older faster than those living lower down. The simple point is that their personal clocks continue to run at the same rate for each of them. They do not speed up or slow down, not to them. A clock then is never wrong, never. It is wrong only in the sense that it always shows a different time than on another clock. This should be clear from Einstein's special theory of relativity, in which there is no universal time, and hence that time is uniquely personal. The relativity of time being observer bound does per se not encompass notions of right or wrong time. So I think I will stop now. I've got a lot left, which you're lucky I won't say now, but you must probably ask questions where I will mention it. So sorry I went over what I wanted to, but I got out most of what I wanted to say. You might not have gathered, I don't think that time travel is possible. You might not have got that. So if you didn't, okay, so let us start. Terry, yes, you're first.
Coming from a science viewpoint, physics viewpoint, first of all, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to object to about what you've said.
I'm delighted.
Because, and of course, we've had this conversation, but the abandonment of Hume by Einstein due to Minkowski's influence, I think, was one of the biggest disasters in the history of science. The relativity that Einstein first proposed based on Hume, based on clocks and based on rulers that he had in his own possession, is such a deep concept and is so fundamental to how things work that by going to the block universe, he undermined his own principle in doing that. And he objected at first. He didn't like Minkowski's math. He said, what is this guy doing? He was kind of upset about it and said, like, I don't understand what they've done in my own theory. But eventually he did go into it. And once you do that, once you accept that block universe, you've accepted absolute determinism of everything by default. There is no other choice once you do that. Because if you have mathematical fantasies in which you can elaborate every equation to any degree you want to with no cost whatsoever, which is what they were doing with mathematical structures, the deterministic math structures, predefine determinism before you even start. And this is one of the paradoxes of why people say, you know, why is the world deterministic? Well, if you start with math that assumes determinism as an absolute principle for no cost, for no reason, which there is no reason for it, there's no physical basis, of course you're going to get a deterministic universe. You can't get anything else. It's not possible. We've had a century of silly reminiscences about why is it deterministic, why is it not? You assumed determinism back then. There's no choice left. So why are you surprised that you're getting debates about whether it is or it is not? Had they kept in Einstein's original path of saying, the only time that matters is my own. It's the only one that's real. It's the only one that means anything. If they kept on that path, we'd have a very different understanding of a lot of these issues. So the block universe, instead, just to explain one thing about the block universe, the reason Einstein leaned towards that is when you accelerate, the understanding was that you kind of slant your definition of time so it goes into the future and into the past. And that's mathematically correct. I mean, that actually is one of the very interesting characteristics of it. And given the framework he had, he eventually was convinced by Minkowski that, yeah, it must be doing that. So since I can see in the future and I can see in the past and they all look like they're mine now, then I have to accept that. What they missed in this point is that everyone's future is determined by what you have hold of personally. And people share this entire universe is a big one that we have. And as long as you're sharing that one's the one that kind of dominates. But this idea of finite, limited views of the future, your future is what you have hold of. It's not some abstract thing that goes for an infinite number of things. And this point has kind of been missed. So people who travel, you accelerate, both sides travel in each other's futures. It's only one of the futures that makes a difference. So, and I've already gone on too much about it, but this is just a fascinating issue. And I think one that physics has to deal with. We can't keep doing this assumption of infinite detail based on nothing other than a philosophical assumption, which is all it is. So mathematicians are philosophers of their own type. Their philosophy is everything's free, everything has no cost, everything is infinite, and that's my starting position, and you can't disagree with it. And this is nonsense. There's nothing in this universe that works that way. Nothing. You can't elaborate. You can't have a Mandelbrot set that you haven't elaborated to infinity. It just keeps going on and on, depending on how much resources you have. So there's a finiteness to the universe that people have refused to acknowledge, even when they hit quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics said, hey, there's a limit. So on you go with this. So I've already talked too much, but this is a fascinating area. I'm getting to the point where I'm writing small equations, fairly simple ones, but there's some really serious issues that need to be dealt with in this. And it goes back to not paying enough attention to the philosophical class. When people like I think you mentioned Brian Greene, when they say these things, they make these grandiose statements about how the philosophers follow the scientists. These are scientists who accepted hook, line, and sinker the idea of infinite formalism without ever questioning it. They just bought into essentially a religion. They didn't even, I wouldn't even call it a philosophy. It was just like a religious precept, infinite math always works. Well, once you, and then you're complaining that people aren't, philosophers shouldn't be taken seriously when you've just accepted one without question. That makes no sense. You have to look at your philosophical foundations and you have to look at them continually. You can't just accept these things and just say, well, because I think math is so beautiful, therefore that has to be everything. That's caused so many careers to be lost, string theory nonsense, so many things that just went nowhere, have done absolutely nothing. They predict nothing. They're not science. And yet they have huge institutions devoted to stuff based on a philosophical assumption. So don't tell me that scientists don't need to listen to philosophers. It's the other way around. They need to listen carefully to philosophers and to listen to what's going on. We all need to listen to each other and say, I don't agree with what you're saying, but man, I should listen to what you're doing because I may be wrong. What a radical idea. So I will shut up now.
Terry, yeah, I argue with everybody. I got nothing to argue with you about. It's terrible. Terrible. Thank you very much.
You're
Jonah, welcome
Yeah,
to the club.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for presenting all of this, and thank you to everyone for being here. Very quickly, I will say I have a prior commitment, so I'm going to jump off at 10:45, but just so you know, when I disappear from this time space, that that's where I've gone. I haven't just left. But what I wanted to say, and there's so much great material that's being brought up, I'd almost have to write my own papers and dissertations that say all of what I want to say and the things that I'm uncovering and exploring. But I want to reiterate if we call it the bridging of philosophy and science, and I think there's many other disciplines to bridge from, to cross-pollinate, to learn from each other, to listen to one another. I also like the mystical and the true spiritual. I think that overlaps a lot with the philosophical. I would say it's very important to not be overly certain in any regards, or to continually question and re-examine and rework what the very limited view and current cognition that we have into the infinite that is out there. So in terms of time travel, in a very simplified way, perhaps we could look at it in just in terms of looking at my choices and playing something through in my mind to see the possible futures that I see for myself, and what am I choosing and what am I actualizing in the physical reality right now. I'll just throw out a number of things that I'm open to, that where consciousness soul streams projected into the physical dimension, that there's many more dimensions metaphysically or that are out there beyond the physical, so to speak. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda has a whole chapter devoted to this, and I think is a very good chapter to read, and he goes into it much more deeply and in more clarity than I can. But some people say that you can quantum non-entangled when you get your consciousness open enough, see different events and pick up on different things, perhaps psychically. People may or may not be open to those realms, but more concretely, yes, I think that there's a lot of safeguards that keep us from messing around in timelines and destroying past events and going to future events and so forth. But I would say, rather than convince anybody or prove anything to anybody, which probably we cannot do, it's more important to continually explore and open and ask the right questions and posit the right inquiry so that we listen and learn and grow further into the things that we're growing into. I'm open to the idea that as someone grows in their psychic power, metaphysical power, spiritual power, personal power, they have more abilities, but that I would say that they wouldn't show them off to people that have not developed them yet. So I think that many things are possible. I'm not going to say what is possible and what is not possible. I hope that in a quick way, I've articulated some things clearly enough to open up many more lines of dialogue. I'm happy to continue conversing with people offline, especially if you want to converse with me. I can give you contact, but I would say that again, it's a personal revelation, and in our personal bubble of reality, the bubble that we are actualizing, work with the time that is here now to choose. And the more that we choose, the chooser and the choice is very vital to opening up greater possibilities, as is the listening to people and really gaining wisdom and so forth from what other people are saying and understanding and how they are moving, and listen to what is true for them or not. So again, I hope that's not too metaphysical or abstract. It makes a lot of sense in my mind, and I hope that a number of points have communicated clearly enough. So thank you. I want to hear what other people have to say as well.
Very much. Thank you very much, Jonah. Yes, it's definitely important to ask questions and to listen, even if we don't agree. Obviously, no, you haven't been in for, I don't go for, I don't, how can I put this? I don't think there is a now. Don't think it exists, but that's a story. That's another story. Dealt with that before, but anyway, it's a very important, and I agree with you. We need to listen to other people, and it's the most important thing. If we all listen to each other, then the world will be a better place. Instead of 40 people here, we had 4,000 people, 50,000 people. I need a very big screen, but the more people that talk to each other, the better it is. I agree with you. Thank you very much, Jonah. Thank you. Anton, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, especially, I mean, I'll just choose certain things to say because of course this is a meaty, juicy topic. But yeah, I enjoy things like this. Yeah, so I think this is going to pose a problem for what you were saying, Ron, about you don't think that there's a now, or part of what I said. That. Oh, well.
That was just, I just slipped that in.
Or maybe you're messing around.
No, I'm not messing around. No, I've got a whole book on it. Really not messing around. Trust me.
Yeah, so I think part of what I say will pose an issue to that, because maybe there is another word that I could think for it. But one of the things that occurred to me while listening to you speak is there's a realm of, and yes, I can believe, although I can't say for sure, spiritual or non-physical, of that's timeless. So it's not, at least not strictly attached to linear time. So it's easy for me to call that the now, the timeless now. But I don't know what other word to use other than timelessness. But maybe it exists simultaneous with linear time, because linear time is a useful construct in which we operate with. That might be the first time that really, in any somewhat clear language, occurred in my own mind. So I'll throw that out there. But it is interesting thinking about how, and I'm aware of, if you travel certain, the idea, if you travel certain places in space or planets in space, that time goes by at different rates than what it would here on Earth, which is part of what you talked about earlier. In an example of like how there you would gain 5 years and people on Earth would gain however many years in age, assuming you would be able to, at least I thought, going back to Earth. It's that's a strange type of time relativity there to try to conceptualize one of the ways in which time can be seen as relative. So those are just some notes that I felt like throwing out, more just interesting ideas than something I'm asserting is for sure true, that I felt like saying.
It's okay. There is no for sure true, so you're okay. But,
okay, we both don't like certainty.
No, because there isn't. But that's fine. Anyway, you're welcome to come back, join the queue again. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Michael, I have a feeling you're going to argue with Terry.
No, I'm not going to argue with Terry, but first I want to say that I have another meeting, so I have to leave soon. So that's why I wanted to say at least something now. So like Terry, I agree with your take on physics. I don't have any objections on this. But I just wanted to point out that when you are saying that Einstein's time is personal, well, we just have to be careful with this terminology, and we have to understand that what Einstein was trying to accomplish is to get some consistent description of time, consistent between observers. So it would be probably more accurate to say that his notion of time is relative to an observer. But of course, we usually think about observers as humans. But in Einstein's view, these observers can make the clocks. And these clocks, they can read these clocks with infinite precision. So in this sense, his theory is still classical. And this has two interesting, so I would say that does not address at least two other aspects in which the time can be like more uncertain or more subjective than it is in relativity theory. So one of them is what you may be alluding with when you are saying that his time is personal. So there is this subjective personal dimension in how we humans perceive the time. And if there is any connection with physical time, it probably to make this connection, we have to go outside the physics and think about this psychological notion of time and how is it related to physical notion of time. And what is the role of this subjectivity at least in the sense how we psychologically perceive the time. Another another aspect of this is that if we can talk about perception of time by other systems than humans, that again, you can put quotes around this word perception. Maybe they don't perceive time like we humans perceive it, although this is an open question in philosophy. But anyway, at least they act in time, they operate in time and space. So there is no doubt about this. And according to Heisenberg uncertainty principle, they cannot measure the time with infinite precision. So there is some uncertainty in their perception of time, maybe perception in quotes, that I am not sure whether it opens the door to time travel, but it probably opens the door to a different understanding of time, at least different from what it is in this classical, again, quote unquote, relativity theory. That I think this notion that each observer can measure the time with infinite precision, this is pretty fundamental for relativity theory. And if you question this, and quantum mechanics tells that we have to question this, then how would it affect the theory? It would be very interesting to see, but so far I don't know this credible proposals of how the theory can be revised if we take into account this uncertainty in time perception or time measurement. So let me stop here. Unfortunately, I have to leave soon. But
can you? Are you still here? Can I just say something? Or are you off now?
Yeah. I have 5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, try. You mentioned the observer need not be human, right?
Yeah, for Einstein, it does not really matter, but since he cares about physicists, so that physicists could agree, and physicists are humans, but this is implicit to the theory.
Okay, yeah, no. The observer does not have to be human, but who goes and looks at what that not human observer showed? If no human ever saw what that observer showed, then it didn't show anything. The observer has to be human at the bottom level, has to be. Otherwise, where's the information? What is it measured? How do we know what it's measured until we look? And we are human, or some of us.
So the question here is that assume that there are no humans in the universe. Would the universe still involve in time?
Of course, no, there'd be no universe.
Right. You can easily imagine the universe without humans.
No, I can't.
If tomorrow we have a nuclear war that would destroy all humanity, and the universe will probably exist as it was.
No, I can't imagine, because I'm here doing the imagining. I can't. Nobody can imagine. We went through this last. Nobody can imagine nothing, because nothing includes us. If we're not here, we're not imagining anything. You can imagine a film where you're not in it, but you're watching the film. Now, if there's a universe that you're in, because you're not, there is no universe without us. There isn't. That's my answer to your question.
So it sounds like you take this position that only humans have this quality of imagining, of this having a subjective experience of the world, that no one else.
Not at all. When we went through this last time. When somebody's dead, right, that person cannot imagine anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
If 10 people are dead, all 10 people can't imagine anything. If everybody's dead, there's no imagination. There just isn't. There has to be an imagination for us to even talk about imagination. The whole thing, when you talk about an empty universe, doesn't make any sense because you're looking at it. You are there looking at an empty universe. I know people don't like that.
Yeah, I guess we may disagree on this point because my way of universe is maybe closer to Spinoza. So I see the whole universe as sort of like
but
animated spiritual entity in the sense that our abilities to imagine, to sense, maybe even to think, I don't know, I would not go that far. They are not exclusive just to us. All objects, all systems in the universe have some sort of disability.
Excuse me.
So if we don't exist, this does not mean that the time and space will disappear.
Yes, it does.
It will disappear for us.
If I disappear, there's nothing. I can't imagine it. I mean, it's pointless. It's pointless talking about my not being here, and I can't talk to you about it because I'm here. And Spinoza did not consider himself not existing. He existed within nature. He did not say, if I don't exist. He never talked about that. Nature is nature, and nature includes us. We're God. But this is a very, a lot of people don't agree with me on this, but I can't help that.
Okay, excuse me, could I make very, very small point because Michael is leaving? I know personally a physicist in New York, Greg Matloff. He working for NASA and for some kind of university, teaching in university. He has a book and he is kind of trying to say that stars could also have some kind of type of consciousness, and they are conscious in their way, of course, in not human way. So they could be also kind of in this kind of discussion, they also could be observers, for example. That's one small point. Thank you. I'm sorry for interrupting. It's just
thank you for your comment, because I agree with this maybe a little extreme view that every physical system is an observer. Not necessarily.
Could I make a quick comment also?
Yes, sorry.
Michael, since you're relieving me, I just want to make a quick comment. I like your point about time, infinitely precise time. There's such a simple point in that to me it's remarkable that it's not acknowledged sufficiently in physics. Time has atomicity, and the atomicity is how fast can you do a clock cycle. It is impossible to create a clock cycle fastest than the fastest cyclic process that we know to exist. Therefore, time has an atomicity to it, has a limit. And yet the abstractions refuse to acknowledge that limit. And to me, that's amazing, because they're going like, if you cannot have continuous time anywhere in the physical universe, why are you proposing it as a model for the universe? Because it does not reflect accurately what's going on with that. And one other quick comment, one of the things I think Ron is trying to get at is scientists, we often manage to ignore our presence in the discussion of the equation. We say that there's a clock out there that's recording that. But the way we're describing it is a very specific thing about how we, as an awareness, as a human being, we know that we will look at the clock and we are involved in that process. We tend to extract ourselves out of that, say, well, if I just make the information very, very minimal, then it won't do it. But any information is still a momentum relationship of some sort between us and that system. So taking ourselves out of that is probably tricking ourselves in a way that we don't realize. Now, I would put it differently. I wouldn't say so much say that the universe has its own consciousness, but the universe, there's a separate kind of consciousness of being aware of these things that, as far as we only know, humans do. And we do very much put ourselves into these equations in that sense. Now, whether that means there's no physical existence of the universe outside of that, I would that's to me, a very different question, and something gets into some really interesting physics. But I think there is a point where scientists, we just absolutely think that the fact that we can abstract ourselves out to a minimum is the same thing as saying we're not there. And it's not true. We're always linked in there somewhere. And the observer that is us somehow winds up doing.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm really
Thank you,
sorry, but I
Michael.
have to go.
Sorry you have to go, Michael. You have to stay double next time.
Yeah, but there is no time travel, so I don't
That's
think
true.
it's
That's
possible.
true. That's true. Saket, sorry for the delay. Saket, are you in a car?
Yeah, I'm
That's
sitting in my
fantastic.
driveway.
That's fantastic. I still can't. That's amazing. Sorry. You carry on. Okay, go.
Okay. So there are so many assumptions and presupposition and approximations that I'm hearing, and I heard what Ron shared in his speech. First assumption is that there is an individual observer, and that is totally an assumption. And another is the knowing structure, the experiencing structure can experience the reality, the perception, the human limited perception. And also, I would like to say that we need to question these approximation, assumption, and presuppositions. And also, there have been people among us who have reached to a different kind of perception. It can't be called knowing, it can't be called experiencing, but it's a direct perception of the universe. And when they reach, and there is an account, like there is a literature on that, huge literature. And if you go into that, like people like Rumi, Lao Tzu, or Buddha, they spoke about that you can't know the reality of anything. There is no way, because you don't exist as an observer. There is a reference point for every observer that we are taking, and that reference point is our past knowledge. And there is no way to experience or know anything mentally, psychologically, without using that knowledge, that past experience. And when Ron says that without humans, there is no universe, essentially he's saying without knowledge, there is no universe as we know it. And that's the truth. The universe that we know is the product of our knowledge. And if you set aside the knowledge, you have no way of experiencing the reality of anything, let alone explaining or knowing. So we really need to question our perception, the knowing structure, the experiencing structure, because it takes a reference. It is heavily influenced from the conditioning, and we use a lot of assumptions. And is there a way, and we have to look at those people who have found those direct way of connecting with the universe, where they say that there is no individual and there is no observer, everything is one, and it's a non-dual experience. I should not use word experience, I don't have any other word for that, but still I'm saying that it's a non-dual perception where there is a freedom. That's why it's called awakening. There is a freedom from this limited illusory self who tries to know everything, tries to experience everything, and that knowing and experience is always referenced to the past knowledge. So there is, like, can we not indulge into assumptions and approximations and directly? And you know what, people have come to those perceptions just by question. Like I was reading, there is one person, Yuji Krishnamurti, and I was reading his that movement when he got into that direct perception. He asked himself one question: how do I know that I am an enlightened man? He asked this question to himself: how do I know that I'm an enlightened man? And the moment he asked this question, and I'm actually rephrasing him, The moment he asked this question, how do I know anything? It is based on whatever he has been told, read, or experienced in the past. And the moment that question came to him, and it hit him so hard that he says that everything went out of my system. All the knowledge, all the experience of millions of years, down to the single cell, not just human beings. The experience, the genetic memory of down to single cell went out of my system. And I don't know what happened after that. It was a kind of a death, like a clinical death. And after that, the perception that he got, it was not the perception that we all have, that illusory, that we use knowledge and past experience. It was a direct connection with, I don't know, I'm again using all these words. I don't want to, but I don't have any other choice. But it was kind of a, again, I will say, it's like I'm the drop inside the ocean. I can't divide myself from the ocean, and at the same time, I can't say I'm a drop. So I'm the entire ocean. So I'm the universe, basically. This is what is the direct perception of those people. So there is no observer.
Keeping in mind that we don't really, we're not living in anyone else's mind or anyone else's experience. And the words that anyone uses to communicate what they think or what they feel are very limited. So we can only make an assumption that we understand exactly what they mean, and we can understand only to a certain point. I think that's important to keep in mind. Sorry for the interruption.
All I'm questioning,
I agree with that.
I'm questioning the knowing structure, the experiencing structure, and not taking. And again, I'm doing the same thing. I'm aware of what I'm doing. I'm taking reference from those people who have experienced those. But otherwise, we do not have any other way intellectually. It's just that you just have to sit in a room and just see by yourself without talking about it. That's the only way. Direct perception.
Well, ... I agree with you that knowledge is everything, but no further.
But who created it? Who created that knowledge?
No further back than when we're born, because that's where knowledge comes from. We don't agree here, but that's fine. You are supposing certain things and calling them true. And I don't call anything true, anything. But you are calling them true. And to that, I object. Because what does it mean? It's true. Okay. We all believe that what we say is true. So somebody's truth is better than mine because you've been sitting in a room or sitting on a mountain. I'm not being, well, I am. I'm not being cynical, which I am. I'm not being skeptical, which I am. I'm just, you're explaining something that that for me, I have to ask you how, and you won't let me ask how because you say it just comes to you. But it's come to a lot of people, all sorts of religious people, and they've seen the light and et cetera, et cetera. So no, what you're saying, I understand, but you can't, I hope you can't expect me, at least, to agree that there's truth there.
I didn't say that what I'm saying is the truth. I'm not saying that I know. This is how I started. This is something can't be known and experienced. It's just something that each one of us has to have that direct perception into, and that perception is not knowing, or it's not a part of conscious structure. So I'm just questioning. All I was doing whole time was questioning our knowing structure and experiencing structure. It is based on the past knowledge and experience and the reference, assumptions, presuppositions, approximations.
I agree.
Yes. So this is what I was questioning. I'm not saying what I'm saying is true. That is, I don't know what is true. The truth is I don't know.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you very much. It's very interesting. You can come back and join the line and carry on another time. Thank you very much. It's very interesting. Agustin, sorry for the delay. Where are you? He's gone. Oh, right. Yes. Okay. I see.
Oh, no, I'm here. Hello.
Yeah.
Hi. Right. So I took a few notes to defend my point properly. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Ron, for the talk regarding time. I liked it. And can you all hear me well?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. So, right. So I will say that I agree with everything that you said, Ron. I think I agree entirely with your conception of time, and particularly I will defend the same position. I will say time travel is impossible. But then when I think about this point, I would like to maybe make a difference. I will say, what is impossible? Is it time travel or science fiction time travel? And I will go for the second one. I think time travel is science fiction. It's not truth. It's not possible right now. And as we know, the little thing that we know about time is clear that it will never be possible. But then it is true that our consciousness is always going with the time. We are conscious right now on the present and on the next instant and so on. And we retain a memory of the instant that just finished. So in that way, we are, I wouldn't say traveling through time, but at least going along within our own times. We are going along with our times. So to make these abstracts more concrete, I would like to use, Ron, your example, the example of Mary and Carol. So in your example, as you said, Mary and Carol they were 25, but Mary is an astronaut, so she travels to the speed of light. When she comes back to Earth, she's 30 and Carol is 75. So has any of those traveled to the future? I will ponder, actually, yes, but not Mary, Carol. In the time Carol spent traveling, which has been 5 years, Carol is 75. So she's going to her own future much farther than Mary, that is still 30, while Carol is now 75. So will this imply that each of us has a deterministic future? Well, only the determination that we are getting older, which is probably the only deterministic thing, that we are getting older every day and then one day we will die. So my point is basically that I will call it rather going with time, that we are going with time every day, not traveling. But if I defend, but it could also be called traveling in our time. That is something that keeps happening, and while we are alive. However, yes, science fiction time traveling is not only impossible right now, it will never be possible. That is absolutely true. So how do I defend this position that we are traveling all the time? Well, basically, if I start a sentence and then I finish it, you have traveled through the beginning to that sentence to the very end, because that sentence for you had sense from the first word to the last one. So an example of someone who lived his life and was not time traveling within his own time will be the example of the famous guy, Clive Weary, the guy who had 30-second memory. He lived through 30 years with that problem. And he used to quote that he felt that the past was always something obscure. He was not traveling through time. He was getting older every day, but his consciousness was always in the same place. At the end of his life, he was actually forgetting, when he was answering a question, at the end of his answers, he was forgetting the question and the beginning of his answers. So yes, that person actually was not aware that was traveling through his own time. Why? Because he was forgetting the starting point. So that is my idea. I wanted to defend with you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Agustin. Okay, thank you. Yes. Yeah, I have to think about that. Interesting. Mike, do you have a camera? You got a hand up. Mike, are you there?
Yeah, I don't have a camera, but I'm here. I have a short statement I'd like to add to the conversation. I have a camera, but it's not working correctly. You mentioned Carlo Rovelli's book, and I think, first of all, he completely agrees with you that time travel is not possible. He also bases his argument primarily on entropy, rather than the properties of time, which I think we agree do fit the model. And entropy says that Humpty Dumpty, when he falls off the wall, all the king's horses and all the king's men can never put him together again. And going back in time isn't going to put him back together again. So so Carlo agrees with you. So and he's almost as famous as you are. The second thing is, and this ties a bunch of concepts together. There are the simulation theory of the universe, which many people disagree with, but there are many people who disagree with every theory of the universe, including the string versus the particle theory versions that we've been talking about. So it is possible to write a simulation where time travel is possible. And so then you, by some means we can't understand, we could travel. Now, taking that half a step further, if the simulation was really good, we as automata within that independent acting automata, within that simulation, would never be able to conduct an experiment that proves that we're in a simulation. And that's a number of people. Sean Carroll, for example, talks about that. Elon Musk, from a practical point of view, talks about that. Now, that takes us back to philosophy, that Plato's allegory of the cave says we can create theories. We ought to start with phenomenological things that we can measure and observe, but we can create ontological theories that give a different view of reality, and all our reality is essentially a different view. But he also comes out with a statement that those views are mathematical models or thought experiments that are strictly in our head. And he then says that the map is not the territory. So you need to consider that when you come up with when you prove from, I don't know, from Minkowski space, from tensor analysis of relativity, that you can't do this, that you've created a mathematical model that you either can or can't do that, but that may not be the reality. The map is not the territory, but it's something we constructed. Now, I don't know enough of the real statements of how to prove that with epistemology or any of the techniques of philosophy, or probably really any of the techniques of physics. I'm not that world class yet, and maybe will never be. But the map is not the territory, And I think you agree with some famous people that said time travel is impossible. But I can create a with 5 pages of Python code or Mathematica code, a model where time travel is possible. But that is again a map which does not describe the real territory, even the territory that I really believe in. So that's, even though I don't have a camera to back that up. If we share a screen, I have some slides though, because I've been thinking about that for a long time. So, but probably not today because there's a lot of hands ahead of me. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Mike. I don't understand exactly what you'll say, because I said in the beginning, you can make all sorts of models and you can do wonderful models and they all work backwards, they work frontwards, they work sideways, wonderful models. But that was exactly my point. All the models you make, are they time travel? Just because you can show mathematical construction or any sort of construction and say, look, here it is, you see, here's time travel. I say, no, it isn't. It's not time travel. They're models of something you say that shows you that it can work. Whereas my position was, it does not work because theoretically there is no time travel. There cannot be. That's the point I made. And you're saying that we can make models. I know we can make models. There'll be models, lots of models. They got models that they've solved the problem of the grandfather paradox. They've solved it. How they solve it? Many worlds. Brilliant. So you don't kill your grandfather in this world, but you got another world, which is another grandfather that you did kill, so it's all right. But this is junk. Sorry about that. This is just playing around. This is not time travel. You're solving problems by making up other things, talking about infinite worlds where everything happens. Everything happens in infinite worlds. What sort of science is that? That's Sean Carroll, by the way. What sort of science is that? I, not being a scientist, don't understand it. Don't understand why you call that science at all. But the point is that I was talking about making models, but that's not science. That's not time travel because it can't be done. I don't see how it can be done. In science fiction, it's done, and if you want to read science fiction, that's fine. They have in science fiction, they have their framework, they have their coherence, and if it works, which is fine. It works within the context of the story, and that's fine. It's okay. I would accept it, but it has to work within in the real world. I can't see it. That was my whole case. Thank you very much, Mike. You can come back.
I'm glad we're in violent agreement with each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. James, sorry for the wait.
No problem. I'm just in the middle someplace. I appreciate your attention and everyone being here. This is fantastic discussion. I really love everything that's really gone on, and I love a lot of people's points of view. I just have a disclaimer. I am not a real physicist. I'm really into philosophy and psychology, and I've read a lot of stuff. I've read at least 3 books on time, and including the Einstein book, the Einstein book on relativity. But this is just a really, and I kind of agree to you that the idea of cheating time travel, I don't agree that time is absolute or that time travel doesn't exist, because in a relative sense it does exist. It's not absolute because time is not absolute, it's relative. So I just wanted to just bring up a couple of things that I've learned. First of all, the idea that time dilation can exist. Acceleration does cause time dilation, and it's recorded. Everything, all the satellites that revolve around the Earth that aren't actually geocentric do record different times, and people come back with their clocks set differently. So it's not that time dilation can't exist. So I just want to make that clear. Time is only subjective from the point of view that in any clock it is unified. So like if we have a clock and like we ourselves are clock, we're observers. As observers, we are privy to a lot of different clocks. One of the funny things about being human is that we don't have absolute knowledge. So despite what we might think, so we don't have a gift of absolute knowledge. And as a matter of fact, the fact that human history took tens of thousands of years to develop agriculture is a good sign of that. The fact that without some degree of astronomical savvy, humans were unable to actually plant crops at the right time. They were unable to learn how to manage agriculture. So it was only with the beginnings of some astronomical intuition, probably coming from the most, from the elders or the most intelligent people in the groups, that the age of agriculture actually came into place. So this big difference existed between human existence and human groupings and the beginnings of agriculture, largely because of not really being able to understand time outside of a naive intuition. So the naive intuitions, I think, like subjectivism, can sort of distort our understanding of time. And as clocks, we are clocks, all beings are clocks, but to a certain extent, animals are extremely clockish. Probably plants are clockish too. We have like internal, the fact that we humans remember stuff in the past. And I think that was one of the speakers, Augustine, brought that up. I think it was the idea that we can actually forget. We actually forget things. We're not privy to time, part of our existence. So we can like think about things that we want to talk about and then forget about them. Or we can be speaking of something, but we forget what we said when we started. So these kind of like mind tricks that our minds play on us sometimes are just evidence of the same kind of thing that happens when we're sleeping. We're just not like privy to time all the time. So we don't have an absolute sense of our internal clock. That doesn't mean we don't have clocks. We have a lot of internal clocks, and we privy to these other clocks. The fact, the time of day it is, the clock on the wall, maybe how far we are, how far we are from the new moon. In other words, when the absolute darkness, when it's absolutely dark outside, maybe we're conscious, to a certain extent, conscious of that. So, so certain kind of like natural relations to astronomical time. Time is not, for my study, I think I feel that time is the absolute relativity of position to all other positions. And this is the Minkowski idea. It's not a block universe. It's not a finite universe, because of course, the universe can't be seen as finite. And of course, the best physical information is that the universe does change to a certain extent, despite the inviolability of the laws of matter attrition and so forth. The universe does actually exist in a changeable patterns. And as a matter of fact, the Earth's revolution around the sun, the Earth's eccentricity would change if another planet or a large asteroid came very close to the Earth. There would be a change in the Earth's eccentricity, and time on Earth would change historically. So it's not that we're outside of the possibility whether we live outside the possibility of that absolute relativity of position. And it is physically determined by all of the gravitational, time is determined by all of the gravitational relations and spatial and gravitational relations, including particle relations, such for light, for example. And that's, of course, the computations that Einstein used in his theories. So, so all particle relations and all gravitational relations are what influence that relativity of our position to all other positions in the universe, and the particular time that we experience in our position, which, like I said, even on Earth could change for all Earthlings at once if the eccentricity of the Earth around the sun were changed. The idea of universal time, I think that was from Terry. I think that's a cool idea. We're not anywhere near that, but if you could actually calculate all the universal, like if you could calculate a median of universal time relations, maybe someday we won't use GMT anymore. Maybe we'll have a universal medium time, UMT, or a solar time. We'll figure out, like what is our relation to the time based on our relation to the sun, so that we could communicate with people across the solar system. So being able to communicate Star Trek time would be universal median time, right? But that it could be solar system wide, or it could be universe wide. Maybe someday there'll be a requirement not to use Earth time anymore, which is GMT. And I liked what Sackett had to say, but it showed also this, and he also indicated where the contradiction lies. The idea is that seeing ourselves as a knowledge is actually an illusion. We are not our knowledge, we are our existence. We exist as clocks on Earth. He used the term the experiencing structure, which is interesting, but it's the entire existence. It's our experience. And so I think that was really great. That's a really great clue as to what our subjective relationship to time is. We only have a experience of time. We can't gauge time just based on our attitude or what we know or anything like that. And scientifically, it's well understood. It's well understood as this situational existence of gravitational, or sum total of gravitational. It can be estimated by a sum total of gravitational spatial relationships. Our position inside space, taken in absolute terms, but of course space is never absolute, and the gravitational situation that any clock like ourselves happens to exist in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you're a very Newton type person. When you talk about a universal time, you're going back a few hundred years. It's why China does not have one time, why Europe does not have one time, why India doesn't, because we can't. There is no one time. That's the whole point. Just isn't. And to throw a big stone into the pond. I was going to do it at the end, but just to wake you all up, I say that what we don't know does not exist. I know you're going to kill me for that, but that is my very, very basic point. Very basic. Thank you very much.
China does have one time. It's there's no separate time zones.
Yeah, well, that's why they're in a terrible state, because one side is dark and the other one's light, and they got the same time. It doesn't exactly help them. I mean, it's why Russia has many, many, many times. They're doing, that's the way it has to be. because there is no universal time. That's what Newton thought there was. There's one time, there isn't. Can't be, because of relativity and something else. There can only be relativity when there's an observer outside the events that are happening. Because if you run next to your friend and you run faster, for you, all you're doing is running faster. Your time is not relative to his time. It's only relative to his time for somebody outside that sees you two running. And I think that we mess around with the word relativity. Everything's relative. It's not. It's relative to somebody else, not to us. So anyway, thank you very much.
We are clocks. We are clocks too. That's the that's my last word on that.
No, I agree. I have no problem with that. But it's all is completely subjective, which is fine. But that's the way it works.
A better word is relative. Everything isn't determined by the idea that we're not influenced by the world.
It's not relative if there's nobody to see it that it's relative. It's not relative to us.
Yeah, it's relative to our position and the gravitation of our situation,
as seen by an observer, not by us.
No, it's not. It's not by, well, the seeing is essentially your idea of the perfect subjectivism. In other words, if you could just get a person, that was uninfluenced by science, they would say, well, I observe time at a certain time, therefore that is my time. And that is your idea that is the only time.
That is the exact opposite to what I think, by the way. But it couldn't be more opposite.
But you tend to confuse things for others because of the
that's
a number of ways.
That's my task in life.
Thank you. Great conversation, though. I love the conversation.
Thank you very much. David, thank you for waiting. Sorry for the long wait.
Yeah, no trouble. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, fine.
So my question, say for instance, I see this pen, you can't really see it, and it drops. I have a physical device, we'll treat it as a black box. We don't know exactly how it works. I hit the switch on it. I see the pen come back up. I see all the physical events around me happening in the reverse order of what I had just experienced, of what I had previously experienced. I hit the switch again, turn it off, pen falls back down, and on the future proceeds, I relive the same experience I had relived previously. I have such a device. I can go back, seeing events happen in reverse as long as I want, then proceed and happen again. Would you argue that that is impossible? Such an device could not exist, or that is not properly time travel? I am not perceiving time backwards. I am not moving backwards through in time. Would you say that's not time travel, or such a device could not exist?
Both. Two things never happen the same way. They can't, ever.
Oh, why do you say that?
I believe that is scientific, although I'm not a scientist. Two things cannot happen because of change, because time moves on. If I drop a pen, pick it up, drop it again from exactly the same position, if there's such a thing as exact same position, which there isn't, well, let's say there is, it will not drop the same way. It can't do. Time has moved on.
Is it not possible I could have the one experience of the pen falling, hit the switch on my black box device, and then I see a reverse order of events? Everything is the same except the order of the events.
Yeah, but a reverse order of events is not going back in time. You're going forward in time, seeing a reverse thing.
So it sounds to me like it might be worth getting into the semantics of my subjective experience of time versus physical time, where I can only imagine, I'm not a physicist, where I could only imagine that physical time would be the order of events. Would you not agree that those two things are different? My experience of time, how I order experiences versus how I order the physical events going on around me.
Yes, it's possible, but you would have to say that there's real time somewhere that you just can't see. And that is problematic as far as I'm concerned.
And David, if I could throw in real quick, the very way you stated your problem is you put yourself in as observing the reversal of the time. And therefore the entire system includes you going forward in time, watching something go backwards in time, which is not time reversal. This gets back to that same issue that as scientists, we often separate ourselves out and assume that because we can say, well, I'm just an observer, that nothing is going on. But especially in a case like that, my gosh, you're actually proposing an entire universe of time, yours, going forward and then locally putting something backwards in time. So on all these problems, and I think this is one of Ron's points, he states it a little differently, but he's trying to say that you can't take yourself out. You just can't, because there's so many assumptions about time that go with your existence. So just
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So I'm moving forward in time, and my experience of time is progressing. But am I not moving backwards in time relative to the objects around me?
No, what you're doing is remembering what you did before. But
Can I give another quick example? I have another black box device. I don't know exactly how it works. I put in X number of years. I am suddenly in a prehistoric era. I see dinosaurs all around me. I go on some adventure. I do some things. I hit the box again. I'm sitting in front of my laptop talking to you guys. Let's pretend we could do this. We do some very advanced archaeology. And we find out, hey, there was a person exactly like me, same DNA as me. Not that the DNA could actually live that long. But there was I did have that adventure. That adventure I subjectively remember having. There is evidence of that. There is physical evidence of that having occurred in our world, and we can all see that. Is that not time travel? Let's say such a device existed. If that's not time travel, then maybe, we're getting into what we mean by time. That might be a helpful discussion, because it would seem to me I could go back and influence events in the future.
How do you go back to somewhere you've never been? That's not going back in time. You've never been there. So how are you going to go back to where there were dinosaurs? You weren't there. Time travel means
in my example,
I was. No. But you can't, you're making up an example that's not feasible. I'm talking about time travel, but that was my first point, that in order to talk about time travel, you have to think about actually traveling in time, not making up models. Traveling in time means that you're going back to something that's happened. It means that you were among the dinosaurs, and now you're going back to where you're among the dinosaurs, but you weren't alive then. That's one of my points of why time travel cannot work.
Well, for the sake of argument, let's suppose I'm immortal. When God made the universe, he made me like same time. Like, could I not go back to that time? Or am I missing the point?
I have to ask God.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering my question.
No, I can't. I mean, you can make up anything, which is fair. I mean, if you want to, make models, and okay, I will discuss it with you. But my point was, I was talking about time travel, and I wanted to say that time travel means something, and that scientists are not referring to time travel when they do their calculation. They're referring to other things, and it sounds very nice, but it's not time travel. That's my point.
If you don't mind me saying, so that touches on another point. I remember the discussion earlier we were having about scientists using, models that aren't very philosophically justified, or not listening to philosophers who talk about time travel. And what kind of worries me about that, and why I think that what's brought this situation about, is because, okay, for instance, Kant read Newton, and then Einstein read Kant to whatever degree, and he also read Hume. But I wonder how many philosophers today, academic philosophers, and you're an exception, or even a lot of philosophers who feel the need to talk about time travel, how privy are they to the work being done in modern physics, to what even Einstein or Feynman wrote, let alone, what their modern progress in the field. So it kind of seems to me like the lack of perhaps education by modern philosophers on the subject of science and physics has kind of led to this disjointed nature of the two fields of research, which
I agree with you. I think that if a philosopher is going to talk about something in the world, he has to make sure that there's something behind it. It's not just words. It's just not things. If you talk about time,
at least make sure my understanding of the physical nature of the world
yes,
is, a couple millennia backwards.
Yeah, that's why I talk to Terry, and he tells me when I'm wrong, and I'll tell him when he's wrong, and we disagree, and then we agree, and then we disagree, and that's how it should work. I can't sit in my room and throw out stuff about time travel if I do not check what other people are saying about it. And when I see there's something wrong, and when I notice that the observer is just being ignored, when Einstein specifically talked about the observer, that relativity, time is relative according to an observer. And he said it, but somehow it's sort of washed out. And that it's essential. That is the basis of it, and that is philosophy as much as it is science. So I'm so for people talking together and finding out something more that we know. I'm not talking about the truth. I'm talking about advancing.
Well, then the two of you, Mr. Terry, Mr. Ron, are definitely an inspiration, and I hope more people take your collaboration as inspiration going forward in their research. But it sounds to me like I'm getting a definite no to my example, and you're saying, no, that is not time travel, even if I had such a magical device. Okay, thank you.
On the other hand, Terry and I could both be wrong. Thank you very much, David. Thank you. Terry, is it okay if I pass over you for a minute, because other people haven't just spoken? Thank you. Mark, there you go. Off you go. Let's have it. I will disagree with everything you say, right? You know that.
I think you'll disagree with half of it, but I'll try and keep it short. I kind of wrote it out here so I can go within 3 minutes, hopefully not more than 5, to reference other people's points of view. But you talk about there not being a now, and some people are saying there is a now. And then I think something amazing is no matter which side, there's a new spirit to philosophy where you can talk about opposites and still philosophize. And I think this is the real spirit of wisdom, which I think logically is sublation, or the reconciling of contradictions with a living kind of logic. And we're going to do that with this example here with time travel. We have infinite time, which is the eternalism, the block universe, determinism, and mechanism. And I think it might have its absolute moment where there is some version somewhere where everything is deterministic, but then it wouldn't be alive. The other one is finite time, which is kind of like presentism, relativity, subjectivity, what Michael was talking about. The extreme version of that is that there'd be a lack of structure, which means there'd be chaos and no time maybe, or some random time, because to have structured time requires reason, which requires logic. So how you reconcile these two, I think, is having an objective subjectivity and a subjective objectivity. Consciousness is pure thought returning to itself, as in one aspect tethered or untethered from the sensuous time of the universe, or sensuous universe, but it's also a bridge back to the infinite for itself, or the beginning of spirit or mind. So it is the eternal returning to the eternal through the individual. The structure of sensuous time and the self are both linked through living logic, the philosophical concrete version of logic, not the dead version of what you call science. It's the universal logic. But in truth, philosophers, even though you make an opposition, philosophers are scientists too, but they're the infinite kind of scientists, the ones that have this infinite systematic logic. You mentioned Sean Carroll. I think this moment of the truth is that the objectivity others itself from its singular oneness to its particular plurality of many presents with their own or even repeating timelines. They are themselves in these living, genuinely infinite loops of quality, but they can also be in these spurious, infinite, or dead mechanical, quantitative, repetitive loops where they can go forwards and backwards in inverted realities. Then there was Jonah, who talked about this more mystical kind of spiritual side of time. I think this is what speculative, genuinely philosophical thought is. It's the scientific mysticism that is not superstition, but based on that eternal kind of logic that completes itself. That's what real philosophy, I think, is supposed to be about, where logic, math, physics, all these particulars aren't in opposition to real philosophy. Genuine philosophy is not a particular to be opposed to other particulars. Like physics, it is the universal knowledge. It is the universal of which those are the particulars. So I think we need to think about time in that same way. To answer the question, is time travel possible? I think it can be, but it also can't be. So psychologically, I think that this eternal consciousness time that Sakat was talking about especially is how these gurus and stuff reference this past lives, all these type of subjective things. I think there's something to that potentially if we have the proper logic. In terms of physical time, in terms of our sensuous time, linear time, I think that if it was possible, the only way it could be possible is through quantum entanglement, which is the simultaneousness of all particles in the universe, which is what Einstein called spooky action at a distance. And now we're building computers with it. So there's something to that where it might open the door. But I'd like to say that who looks at the human observer then when we're trying to measure time? I think it's objectivity that measures itself with an internal self-grounding criterion. It is relative to itself, but in spirit, it returns to itself from othering itself. So you always get a return to self, which is the simultaneousness, which is simultaneously eternal and finite. You get both those moments at the same time. But I want to kind of finish by talking about these clocks that, who's mentioning the clock thing? Somebody mentioned the atomic clock. I think it was Terry. The circularity is what gives us what we call sensuous time. But what if there was an infinite circle of time, an infinite clock, an infinite circle? What if that's the circle of pure logic itself, the idea, the absolute idea? So all are happening simultaneously in eternal time. When Sakat was talking about the death of that guru he was talking about, he was ending finite time, the cellular clocks, and returning to this realm of objective time that is eternal. It is the simultaneous happening of all the logical categories in their right necessary order. So absolute science, you could say. And then if you negate all that you think you know about finite time, you can rebuild your perceptual experiences in sensuous reality from that eternal perspective, where you have a sense of timelessness in yourself, because when you have infinite simultaneity, that is absolute presence. That is the absolute universal time, the true present objective moment. And I think that to have both of them at the same time, this simultaneity of both senses of time, the supersensuous and the sensuous temporal, this is where time travel could be possible as a speculative sense of the memory of absolute spirit in us. Unlike normal gurus who rely on direct perception or intuition or faith where they can't talk about it, there is one philosopher in history who gives us the explicit scientific version of that experience, where we can communicate for the first time explicitly what was previously the ineffable of the wise. But now we would do it through the universal way of science, true philosophy, and the universal representation of experience. So I hope that makes sense.
Not to me. Mark, you lost me. You lost me completely.
I had to write it down, so I almost lost myself.
When you've got contradictions, you can't take something that you made up and then do a contradiction with something that you didn't make up and say, oh, I'm going to put those together, I'm going to get to something else. You're talking about infinity, and you're talking about two things happening at the same time, and you're contrasting them to something else, and you're coming out with wonderful stuff. from that. And that what is universal knowledge? What is that?
Logic. So I'll summarize more simply. I think what's happening is in all the viewpoints that we're expressing here, we're on two sides and conflating them. The bridge between these two worlds of temporal time and eternal time, the bridge between those is logic, but not the dead logic.
What is eternal time? What is that? What is eternal? That's religious.
Well, actually, real philosophy preserves the concrete totality of religion, but it puts it in pure thought form. So that's why you get the best of both worlds. The eternal time doesn't happen necessarily in this world, except as a return to this eternal world of pure logic through the temporality. So you're getting that nice circularity. And I think that without that universal logic, I don't think that we can reconcile those opposites. I think they do remain a hard contradiction.
What is I don't understand what universal logic is. Who has it?
You know who has it. I think, to be honest, I think Hegel has it. I think he mapped out the self-grounding logic. Yeah. I tried not to say his name. Did you notice?
No, I noticed. I was waiting.
You made me say it. I want people to go and look at it for themselves.
I know.
And they can find it in other places.
But, I'm not, how can I put it? I'm not convinced, but I don't understand what universal logic is and who has it. And if there's only one person in the world who has it, who had it, then he's God. And Hegel is not God.
Well, that's what spirit is.
Even he said he's not God. Although he did think a lot of himself, but he did not say he was God. And I hope you're not saying he's God.
Well, there can only be one in itself God, but spirit is the God in all of us, right? So Jesus had it, Buddha had it, Confucius had it, all these great minds had it, but they couldn't explicate it in philosophical form, scientific form. That's why Hegel was the first to come along and put what was in faith, religious consciousness, into its scientific systematic form, which is the self-grounding logic. It doesn't need anything outside of it, which is why it can be the present moment, because it doesn't rely on anything other to itself. So that's why I think it makes sense.
There are religions who would not accept that God is inside us.
Well, at least, I think that's not true, because I think we can know divine knowledge.
It's not true that there are religions who do not believe that God is inside us. Is that what you're saying?
No, I think you're right. I think there are some that are, but I'm thinking the philosophical kinds, the kinds that have philosophical truth, do say something like that.
Okay. Well,
I know it's hard. I think this is the first time maybe somebody's explicated it this way.
I admire your consistency. Okay, it's very good, and carry on. You do realize that you've got a hard nut to crack with me, right?
Well, we'll get you there.
Okay?
Or you'll crack me.
Many have said that, but okay. Thank you very much. It's always very, very interesting to listen to you, despite the fact that you lose me anyway when you talk about stuff that I don't understand, like eternity, which I don't understand. I don't understand what infinity is. I don't understand what universal logic is. I don't understand what contradiction of two things or one thing cannot exist, but exists because the other one doesn't exist. This to me is difficult. Let me put it that way. Thank you very, very much. And please carry on the way you're going, because you're a good person and you want everything to be good. And that's really good.
Sorry, just a quick interjection in regards to Hegel, that I think it would be helpful if Hegel himself was very much, his philosophy of eternity and the universe and all that was very much affected by the philosophy of Rumi. So just going back to that might be very helpful to understand where both of them meet.
Can you repeat that? I didn't. The sound was a bit strange. Can you repeat that, what you said?
Sorry. So I was saying that philosophy of Hegel, when it comes to eternity, when it comes to time and the unity of universe, is very much affected by the philosophy of Rumi himself. So just going back to that would be helpful understanding where the two meet in their ideologies.
Okay, I can accept that. Thank you. We're gonna get back to you because we've got to get to Claudio who's been waiting. Hi, Claudio.
Hi, can you hear me clearly?
Yep.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Yeah, I agree with you, Ron, when you said earlier that any traveling to the past will pertain only to human memory. Right? You did say that. Right? Okay, yeah. So, yeah, human memory, especially when during altered consciousness states, for example. Actual cases are like during people who are near death, those near death experiences. Now, a common theme in the near death experience is the life review, right? When a person rapidly sees the vast majority of their entire life history, in some cases, the totality of their life history from a very young age to their present age. And it happens either in some cases like instantaneously or in super fast speed. So in that sense, their consciousness is altered in a way that enables them to understand fully what they're actually seeing in a very super fast time. So in this way, the linearity of time appears to be greatly diminished, or actually it totally disappears. During this altered consciousness, altered state of consciousness, your consciousness in effect becomes like your desktop computer that can do like 100 million operations per second. Many of these experiences, people who have these experiences, are actually able to feel what the other person is feeling, especially when they actually hurt somebody. So they're experiencing the life of you. Obviously, we do things that hurt other people, and they're actually able to put themselves in their position. So not only are they seeing what has happened, they're able to feel what is happening with their emotions. So in a way, this is the closest we've come so far to actually traveling back in time through our memories. And you actually said that when you were speaking of any traveling to the past will pertain only to human memory. Regarding future traveling, I think the closest we've come so far is when we use predictive modeling, when specialists use predictive modeling to predict what's going to happen in the future regarding something specific, like weather forecasting, or like what's actually going to happen 5 billion years from now with our sun. The sun will actually die, right? So, but that's not actually traveling into the future. Although that's the closest we've come in, like using predictive modeling, fancy mathematical calculations and so on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudio. Fika, sorry for the long wait.
No worries. Thank you very much. So it's good because at this point, I don't have much to say. I just, one thing that comes to my mind, I have to say that the way it affects my time in my mind, when I hear any statement that, that is used to say, I know, or this is the absolute truth, or anything like that, it literally collapses my time for me, and I just disappear from that particular time of discussion. So I wanted to go back to something that I think that there's a time that exists, and there's a time that we invent in the way that we understand it. So we use the numbers, we use the hands on the clock, we use the measurements, the way that we can understand them. But there's something beyond that. And why I say that, with this, I'm going also to go back to David Galloway. I think he was talking about dinosaurs, the experiences of dinosaurs. And yourself, Ron, asked him, how can you go back in time if you haven't been a dinosaur? But I'm going to bring that a little bit closer and put it in this idea of the existing time and the invention of time by us. We come across in life with people that we all experience life in our ways, but some of us come out with PTSDs, for example. Some come with depression. Some come with all different kind of mental dilemmas and hardship. And I'm thinking that this PTSD is exactly that time traveling that we're talking about. It's part of that time traveling. Why? Because I can look at myself and say, do I travel physically through time? Am I getting picked up with my physics from here and put 20 years earlier or 20 years from now? That doesn't happen. But my mind can literally travel through my memories. And it can also travel through ideas that I pick up. I don't know how I pick those things up, but maybe it happens to many of you, or maybe you hear of people that, hey, I had a dream that someone that I know passed away. In a week or 2 weeks or 3 months from then, that person passes away. Maybe very similar to the dream that your friend told you or you experienced. So there are things with time that we experience. And I think it's important, at least for myself, I never apply what I think to other people, but for myself, that the way I define anything in life is really straightforward, connected to my experiences of life. Sometimes when I think about time, I see this ride in the amusement park. There's a pillar and there are, I don't know, 100, 150 ropes attached, and each rope is attached to a chair. So you will get 100 people sitting on each of these chairs, individuals. The pillar moves. It's only one pillar that moves everyone. But every single one of those people experience this ride in their own different ways. Some of them, they may really panic because they think I may fall and die. They go through their memories. Some of them would be absolutely bursting with excitement. Time would not pass for them. They would be stuck in joy. So this experiment with time, I really believe is very, very important to pay attention to, because it goes back to the way we empathize with people. Let's say you go through some really rough times in your life. Time for you stops. For me, my time is going. I don't see that you're stuck in your time, in your pain. And therefore, I can't bring myself to the point that I would actually empathize with your pain so I can help you out. And I think this is what, again, for myself personally, I make that very important for me to pay attention that my time is not exactly moving like someone else's time does. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense, but it has nothing to do with time travel. It's traveling in your mind, and traveling in your imagination is not traveling in time, because traveling in time means you're going to another time in the past where you were, and you're not gonna, you can never go back to where you were apart from in your mind. And that's what you call time travel. And going forward, I mean, when you talk about, you dream about somebody dying, you know that everybody dies at some point. So your dream is not that, you know, brilliant, because somebody's going to die at some point. So
not exactly, because there are situations that you can literally get a dream that, for example, I hope this doesn't happen to anyone. You have a dream that your brother dies, and within a week, within 3 days, within a day, something like that happens. And also, I'm not sure why we confine ourselves to the knowledge that we have today of our lives, because obviously our knowledge is almost nothing compared to what is out there. Why are we so why aren't we open to admitting that our knowledge is really minimal to what is to what life is?
Well, here we come to a very basic point. I did say very controversially that what we know doesn't exist. Now, to say that there is a huge amount of knowledge out there that we haven't got doesn't mean very much, because if we don't have it, we don't have the knowledge. That's it. I mean, the fact that I only know a few things, but there's more knowledge out there doesn't mean anything to me if I don't have it. I mean, what is it? What does it mean? I will try to get more knowledge, and when I have the knowledge, I will know. But until I do, it doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. You will know things I don't know, right? I accept that, but it doesn't mean anything until you tell me, right? I mean, I assume that everybody knows things I don't know, and vice versa. But I can't touch any of it. I mean, what difference does it make to me? I need to know in order to know. Sorry about that, but otherwise they're just words. It's knowledge. Knowledge is knowledge, as far as I'm concerned, is everything. Without that, there isn't anything. I can't cope with things that are out there that I don't know about. But if I say they're out there, then in that case, I already have knowledge that they're out there. It's the old thing with the tree in the forest, right? Which I've expanded to say, if there's a tree in the forest and it falls, and nobody knows about it, did the tree fall? But as soon as I say that, I've already told you that a tree has fallen. Therefore, the whole thing is a ridiculous question. I have to talk about a tree I don't know about, but as soon as I talk about a tree I don't know about, there's a tree in my knowledge. Therefore, I can't get past that. You see, now that might be my problem. That might be what you're thinking. It might be my problem, but it's the basis of my philosophy. It's the only thing that keeps me going is the fact that what I don't know just isn't. Right?
So what I'm thinking is that these very basic rules, very basic things that we look at and we say, hey, look, this is very basic, so I'm not going to think about this anymore. Maybe those are those very things that put the chains on our feet, and we can't really progress into our philosophy of life, into our understanding of each other's lives. Just when you look at everyone, from the very close people in very close proximity to you to people very, very far from you, how much are we really able to connect with each other? Not much at all. Not much at all. Even though we like to pretend that we understand, we like to pretend that we connect, we don't.
I agree.
And this is where I think that it's a very good idea to every once in a while just pause and say, maybe the knowledge that I'm thinking I have is just not the right kind of knowledge. Maybe I need to wash my mind. Maybe I need to wash my mind, close my eyes, open, and look at life in a different way, because there is that possibility that I would see something that I haven't seen before.
I agree.
Because now I am conditioned to think in a certain way.
I agree. But until that happens, I don't have it. But I'd like to know how to wash my mind.
But you wouldn't have it if you don't decide to wash your mind, right? You wouldn't have it.
Okay, I will decide to wash my mind. I'll tell you next time. I will come with a washed mind, and I'll tell you what it's like. Okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you very much, Mika.
Thank you, Ron.
I want to go grab a rag.
Morris, at last.
Yes, I'm not going to say very much on any deep level because I don't think very deeply. I'm very superficial.
No.
And there are certain thoughts that have occurred to me as I've been listening this evening to the discussion that just keep coming back to me. And you're going to hate every word I say. But first of all, I'll just say that I loved every word that Vika said. And I think she was pointing out something that is beneath this discussion. And that is, I asked myself, why are we fascinated by time travel, either going to the past or going into the future? Why does the subject even occur to us? And the only answer I could give myself was this. It's my old leitmotif that I keep coming back to, which is death. And death is our big problem as human beings. And somehow time travel gives us the opportunity, were it to exist, were it to be possible. Time travel, just thinking about it, enables us, if we travel backwards in time, to get to a place where we weren't in existence, or if we travel forwards in time, get to a place where we will not be in existence because we will have already been dead. It somehow overcomes our finite mortality, being born and dying, and having this window in between those two events. That window somehow fills us with fear and trepidation. For most of us, anyway. I'm talking about myself, I suppose. And time travel perhaps is something that could help to make us pretend that we can somehow overcome it. I think that's also partly what is involved with science. I'm not objecting to science, but I think that sometimes we use science in order to protect ourselves from our fear of the unknown. There is so much that we don't know. And if we can pretend to ourselves that we know an awful lot, and every day we know more, then we have less and less to fear, don't we? Well, I don't think that's true. And we look outside ourselves to find those things that can explain our world and who we are in our world. We look outside ourselves, and yet the answers are, I think, mostly inside ourselves. And it's only when I maybe think of when she said washing in your mind, perhaps that was just a way of saying, look inside yourself, or find some other way of seeing yourself from the inside looking outwards. Really, that's all I have to say. And I've enjoyed the discussion very much. And it's about time that I went to sleep.
1 second before you go, though. Well, 1 second. First of all, I agree with everything you said.
No, you don't.
Oh, I see. I do. But.
You all heard that, didn't you? You all heard that. And it's recorded as well.
But. Exactly. Now comes the but.
You're going to but me.
Yes. See, everything you said is right, but that was all psychological. And whether, yes, I agree that time travel is very, very good for us, because we can do things we can't really do. It makes us feel good. It's pretending. But I was talking about the theoretical possibility, and you're talking about our imagination, and Fika also talked about our imagination, which is great. Imagination is wonderful. But on the other hand, that's all it is. But it's not a small all, it's a very, very big all. I'm not dismissing imagination, but we cannot imagine what we can't imagine. So what was the last thing you said that I agreed with? What was the last? Something about, what was it? I don't remember. Repeat it quickly.
No, my memory is not as sharp as it used to be.
No, it's mine. That's why I don't remember.
And my memory is not as sharp as it used to be. And the last thing I said was that we should be looking more inside ourselves rather than outside ourselves.
Okay. So I've got two things to say here. We can't look outside of ourselves, and we can't look inside ourselves either. It occurred to me as you said it, and I've never put them together. This sounds more like Mark than me, because there's a contradiction here. We can't look out of ourselves because there is nothing outside that we are the center. There is, as Fika said, we can't identify with somebody who's in pain. We can't feel the pain. We can't do it. We can't get out of ourselves. And then you talk about look inside ourselves, but looking inside ourselves is impossible because it's so subjective. Our looking inside ourselves means absolutely nothing because it's us looking inside ourselves. It's a Gödel incompleteness thing that we can't do it. So I agree with everything you said apart from those two, which I don't agree with, but I agree with everything.
May I just prove my point, though,
Yes.
about looking inside ourselves?
Yes.
If you take looking outside ourselves and say, I can prove that looking outside ourselves is possible because having done that, studying phenomena, for instance, we are able to do things that we weren't able to do before. We've understood something about space, so we can send a rocket to the moon. When we look inside ourselves, we are able to make ourselves less fearful and accept things in our lives that otherwise we couldn't accept. And these are also things that we were unable to do before we looked inside ourselves. So even though you think it's not possible, lots of people do it.
Yeah, because they wrongly think that they're looking inside themselves. Everybody wants to look inside themselves, but you do realize it's a vicious circle. It's you looking inside yourself. You who are subjectively looking inside who you think you are, right? It's subjective. It doesn't mean anything apart from sounding that okay, I've looked inside myself, I can change, etc., etc. But it's you're the one who's changing. But
I'm the observer. I am the observer of myself. You have no problem with the observer of physical phenomena in the world. You talk a lot about the
Correct.
observer has to be taken into account.
Correct.
And I'm the observer of myself.
That's impossible because it's completely subjective.
But in a collective way.
Oh.
I mean, if I see the discussion between you two, so I always see myself not only as an individual, which I am, but always in a global social context. So when you say, Morris, that you look into yourself, well, I'm wondering whether you can detach yourself from your social being. I mean, if you are Marxist, then you couldn't. And I am more prone to believe that there is no real clear distinction between ourselves, the individual observer, and a collective observer. And especially, I think the imagining and imagination, that's such a big term here that's been used. And actually, I was thinking also, Ron, to what you said the function of imagination is actually to imagine or to put yourself in a place that you have not been, or to imagine is to actually imagine things, the absence of things, to be able to imagine something that hasn't been there or stopped to exist or perhaps will exist. So there is some sort of dissonance. Of course, it is within the observer. I cannot imagine something I have not seen as such, or cannot, but I can imagine an absence, and maybe the time travel that Fika was talking about, and Morris, your first question, which was also on my mind, why would we do that? Apart from the scientific discovery but why would we want to travel in time? And perhaps it's also connected to what you said, Morris, about death, and it's to prolong our being, or to see our being in the past, in the future, where we are not. And perhaps that is impossible, but also the imagining. We are, I mean, time is a conceptual, is a social concept basically. I mean, time is a imagination. We can't see it. It is some sort of fabric of our imagination, perhaps like other concepts like society, like democracy, like other concepts that we as individual human beings, but especially social human beings who live in a social context, cannot have to take that into consideration. And that reminds me of Aristotle, who said that, that humans are zoon politikon, we are political beings, but to be political means to be imaginative, to be able to imagine different states of affairs, to be able to imagine a better life or a better government, or to imagine all these social concepts that have to do with politics. So Aristotle, I think, when he meant we are political beings, we are imagining beings, and with that we can imagine traveling in time. Scientifically, probably not, Terry, not yet, to be able to actually do that. But I find the question interesting in trying to solve ethical problems, or as Morris says, our place as humans within ourselves, within existentialism as well. So that was my input. Sorry, I barged in before you, Terry and James.
Very naughty.
Debbie, thank you very much for saying something about being part of a group, or in other words, turning this looking inwards into something more universal. It's never completely universal, because it's also dependent on society and all sorts of other, and politics and all the rest. I never understand why it is that for instance, Einstein, who has been discussed a great deal in these meetings, and came up with an equation. He tried to explain phenomena that he could see in the world with an equation which would explain everything, or as near to everything as possible. But when Freud came up with whatever he came up with, and others after him, trying to explain phenomena within ourselves, we don't seem to accept that as easily. What I'm saying is that we should look at both of these parts of us, that is the external and the internal.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you very much. Very interesting.
Ron, I'm sorry, can I just very quickly?
Yes.
When I was talking about the idea of experiencing being somewhere else, either in the past time or in the future time, and experiencing things that have happened or will happen, you mentioned imagination. So even the imagination and experience, we can imagine an experience, or we can experience an imagination. At the same time, there are distinct differences between them that in today's time we're not we don't have that time to go over that. But I think it's important to make that distinction between the two experiences. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Terry, and then James.
Yeah, I think David Galloway is gone now. Is he still online?
I think he's gone.
Okay, well, I'll mention in case he goes back to the recording, but there's a science fiction trilogy called the Void Trilogy. You can look it up in Wikipedia. But it actually describes a machine of the type he was talking about, where you could actually reproduce time. It's so expensive that it consumes entire galaxies in order to do it. And that's one of the reasons I like it, because I think it's one of the most realistic portrayals of this casually thrown out idea about going back and changing time. Peter Hamilton took the trouble to say, well, what would that actually entail? And he wound up eating up entire galaxies to build a machine that would do it. So it's a kind of an interesting little twist on how that went with that. Debbie, I like your point about space and time. One of the things that has fascinated me lately is the incredible degree to which not just time, but space are constructs that we have to create with our own cognition in order to make them viable. If you look at the details of special relativity, there are all sorts of interesting assumptions about, first, give me an example. First, I set out a whole bunch of clocks over a huge expanse of space, and I then synchronize them to a particular time. And I guarantee you, no matter how you go about it, no matter how you cut it, slice it, or dice it, until you do that, you cannot define space. You have to put machines out there, synchronize the way you designed it according to your program to give your idea of what space is. If you don't do that, you will find out that you don't have any real definition of space. In fact, that is the actual resolution of the twin paradox. The twin who accelerates loses his space. He has no future. He has nobody but himself. He loses the universe around him, and he actually sees the universe go through essentially what are time zones. And it's symmetrical. It works both ways, but there's no future for him. The one who's traveling doesn't have a future anymore. It lost it all when they started traveling. These things are remarkably dependent on having actual devices and relationships, all of which have to be designed and built. And this is one of the reasons why you cannot take the observer out of this, because you can't define X, Y, Z, T without an observer. And I don't mean that in some abstract way. I mean it literally. The equations do not predict reality unless you have mechanisms behind them that accomplish that. And the mechanisms always turn out to be finite. This is one of the big differences of where I think physics has to go in the next century, is you've got to stop this infinite everything nonsense and start going back and saying, well, yeah, an accelerated spaceship, but it's just that one spaceship. I'm not accelerating the whole universe. That's why you get a difference in the time dilation. And just an incidental point, I love this because this is something that's just really has come up in the last month or so. You hear the things about time dilation, right? Paradox that you have time dilation, that's what causes one to. That is incorrect. That is actually not what special relativity under the Poincare transformation says. And the fact that we don't see that it's a little subtle glitch in our brains. We don't like to think of things in a certain way. It's actually, time dilation is completely symmetric, and it never explains time paradoxes. Both sides age very slowly. The part that causes what we think of as time travel is this thing, an age gradient, which you actually go across a series of time zones. So they look like time zones, very much like time zones. So you just keep going, time zones get closer together, the faster you go, and you travel through the other person's universe faster, not your own, never your own. Your time is the only time that counts. But if you're interacting with some other entity, then you see that. What's marvelous about this is it's fully symmetric. There is no, I can actually go around and telling scientists, it says, you're violating Poincare symmetries. You're saying that you absolutely believe in Poincare symmetries. No, you don't. Because the moment you say that time dilation is cause for time travel, you mess them up. So I'm sorry I'm getting on with that, but leave it at that. Time, space and time are like programs with a lot of machinery behind them. And we have to move to some version of the universe that's closer to how it actually works. And it don't work that way. If you think about the past as like a flat plane, it's actually more like a cone. Things happen, but on both sides of it, you can dive in different definitions of time, but there still is a kernel there that you say whatever happened, has happened. My final comment is, folks, I do believe that Ron Green is a closet physicist. Don't let anybody know about this. But I've been trying to tempt him over to the dark side because he's got a good mind for this. And with that, I'll wrap it up.
I deny it. Thank you, Terry. James.
Great, still a great discussion. Okay. Yeah, still great discussion. Just one thing though, I just want to make sure if you're a closet physicist, I'm okay with that, just as long as you stay out of my closet. what Terry just said, I thought that was really interesting, but it's also this kind of, there is this kind of like pessimistic view, I think. So I just wanted to sort of like add, even though something is relative, like even though time and space are relative, it does not mean that they're necessarily inaccurate. So so that all measurements will be accurate or insecure in some sense. And I just the other thing, defensively, I think that this is like a classic homonym, because of the fact that I said, well, there's a hypothetical Star Trek scenario where you would have to escape from Earth time and measure and be able to communicate with disparate people in disparate gravitational and spatial situations, and be able to communicate time over disparate space, over disparate gravitational and spatial situations, like in Star Trek, where you're actually controlling multiple galaxies and so forth. So those science fiction kind of scenarios might point to the need for a more universal time, but I didn't say that it has to be a finite or fixed, non-relative time like Newton believed in. So that's a bit of that's a ad hominem reference there. And it's not as bad as myself. I will attack people's philosophies just on the basis of their principles. So I admit, that's not as bad as that. But that's a kind of a classic ad hominem reference. I am not. I don't believe what Newton believed about time. I don't know if I have anything else to say about it. That's it. But that's such an interesting meeting. I just loved what everyone had to say. Oh, and the other thing was this idea of how this blends in with Hegel. I think what you mentioned. This, and I did want to recommend one philosophy to you. There's an American group that is forwarding philosophy called inferentialism, which is kind of a blend of analytic philosophy and Hegel. And it's something that people might want to investigate that are interested in philosophical points of view. So I'm just beginning to investigate that. It's very interesting because it's kind of like a pleasant blend of some of these concepts. Thanks.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you. I just want to drop one bomb before we leave, just to keep you thinking for another month. By the way, talking about time travel, why is it that that the first Sunday of the month gets to me quicker than all the other Sundays? I just thought you'd like to think about that. But my question is this, just to keep you going for a month. I've got a problem about reality and whether anybody ever can see reality or know what it is or perceive it, etc., etc. So my question is this: since the observer is outside the events and the participants, who sees what actually happens? Do we ever, whether we are observers or participants? Who is the one who actually sees what happens? My answer is
can you just explain what you mean by actually?
Correct. I actually can't. Thank you.
I actually knew that you couldn't.
I know. That's why I.
That's
Ron,
was the other point.
I thought you were going to bed.
Ron, can I throw in a quick?
Yes.
Can I throw in a quick comment to James?
Yes. Yes.
James, one of the things you mentioned about the precision of the network, one of the things I think is absolutely fascinating about going to a mechanistic version of relativistic frames is that you can do what you're wanting to do with much more precision once you recognize how it works. So the way you create, there's no limit to how precise you can make your definition of space and time. If you get enough matter involved, if you get enough space involved, if you get enough clocks involved. but you have to do it. You have to actually build it. And that is what's just fascinating. Get rid of this mathematical abstraction of abstract spaces that you can't actually touch and you can't actually do anything, but boy, there's such nice equations, they're so pretty. And instead you say, no, I actually, and this is what astronomers do all the time. They come up with time standards, they take the existing data and they produce that. And it just adds a clarity to it where you can start talking about, under the condition that the observer has connections with all these things, you can approach that with asymptotic precision on what you're doing it. But the idea that it's built puts a whole different spin on the whole thing, because you're saying that it still basically starts with me for my definitions. And incidentally, on Debbie, your comment earlier, I think, I don't know if I said this now, but I think one of the reasons why time travel fascinates us is we're the ones creating it. We're the ones creating the definition of time. Our brains are built to do that. It's a very handy way to process the world, to do things, take some shortcuts, and they are shortcuts. And for most cases, in most situations, it works. But there's all sorts of situations where it doesn't work well. When the state changes too fast, the space approximation becomes meaningless. And the degree to which space and time are creations of our mind is, to me, it's just astonishing. The more you get into this, there is a very solid reality. Well, I'm going to be careful. I'm going to get Ron man me. There's the Poincare's space-time underneath all this has very well-defined rules, but they are not the ones we use. The ones we use are artificial. They're created. They're synthetic. They're dependent on all sorts of things. So it's just, I think this is fascinating. If you take the idea of self first, observer first, human type view, and go from that, it just gives you an ability to be more careful about how you say things. Again, this goes back to this whole thing about philosophy helps guide you in understanding what is important and what is not sometimes. Enough.
Yeah, I'm kind of like on your, I completely agree with you on principle. I think I love this question, the way, the way I'd pose it is, how is the concept of space and time viable without machines? So and I just wanted to add, what we issue here is that the mechanisms are necessarily finite. So if we talk about the sense of time of a bird, even a migratory bird, that has a much more sophisticated sense of time probably than we do, or human sense of time. All of these times are to some extent finite, but definitely mechanisms. We set them up as finite mechanisms because we want comparisons. We want to make comparisons, and they're useful because we can relocate them. And so I think that's. But that, and my point, before was that just because they're relative doesn't mean they're necessarily inaccurate. Yeah, they're accurate within a finite frame. So yeah, I completely agree with you on their scientific principles about measuring time. And yeah, once again, my point was about universal time was 100% hypothetical, just based on the fact that I watched a great number of episodes of Star Trek. I apologize.
Well, thank you very, very much. That was very, very interesting. You're all wonderful. And again, next Sunday of the month, it's going to come very quickly for me. And I'll see you next time. Thank you very much, everybody. Done a grand job.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.